They offered his black wife $12 million to disappear. She looked at the contract sitting on that glass table. Her husband's mother, his aunt, his grandmother, all watching her like she was a problem that needed solving. And she didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't beg. She just said no. And that was when Helena Kwan leaned forward, her diamond earrings catching the pool lights, and said 7 words that changed everything. Then we'll make sure he leaves you. What none of those women knew, what no one in that mansion knew, was that somewhere behind the glass corridor above the terrace, a shadow had stopped moving. Adrian had heard everything. If you've ever loved someone so much you would burn everything to protect them. Stay with me. Hit subscribe and drop your city in the comments below so I can see how far this story has traveled. Like this video so more people find it. Because what happens next? Nobody walks away the same. The drive out to Long Island took 47 minutes, and Naomi spent most of it looking out the passenger window. Not because the scenery was interesting. The highway in October looked the same as it always did. Flat, gray, the trees stripped down to their bones like they'd been caught in the middle of something they weren't ready for. She looked out the window because she didn't trust her own face right now, and Adrian noticed everything. He always had. It was one of the first things she'd loved about him. Now, sometimes it was the thing that made her most careful. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm always quiet." "Not this kind of quiet." He glanced over at her. His hands sat easy on the wheel, the way they always did. Big hands, steady, the kind that looked like they could crush something and chose not to. "Naomi." "I'm fine, Adrian." He didn't push it. That was the other thing about him. He knew when to wait. She turned back to the window and pressed her fingers lightly against her coat pocket. Inside was a small white envelope. Inside that envelope was a photograph, black and white, grainy, the size of her palm. And in that photograph was the most terrifying, extraordinary, impossible thing she had ever seen in her life. 12 weeks of something she hadn't planned and couldn't stop thinking about. Something she had been carrying alone for 3 days because she wanted to tell him right. Somewhere private. Somewhere that was theirs. She hadn't expected to still be waiting. The Kwan estate appeared behind iron gates that swung open without anyone touching them. The house beyond was the kind of house that didn't need to announce itself. It just existed, large and pale and lit from within, every window glowing with the kind of golden warmth that belonged in a painting, not in a life. Naomi had been through those gates 11 times in 2 years of marriage. She had counted. She knew the exact number the way she knew the exact temperature of water before it became uncomfortable. A skill you developed when you spent enough time in places that didn't want you. The car stopped. The valet appeared. Adrian came around to her side before the door was fully open, offered her his hand, and for a moment she just looked at it. His hand, familiar, the black ink of the dragon tattoo curling around the side of his wrist. And she took it. "Hey," he said, low enough that only she could hear. "Hey, I chose you." He said it the way he sometimes said things that were important, without ceremony, without softening, just the fact, clean and plain. "Whatever happens in there, nothing changes that." She nodded. She almost told him then, almost pulled the envelope from her pocket right there in the gravel driveway with the valet pretending not to exist 3 feet away. But Adrian's phone buzzed, and he looked down, and his jaw shifted in the way that meant something needed his attention, and the moment closed. "Go ahead," she said. "I'll be right behind you." He hesitated. "Adrian, go. I can walk through a door by myself." The corner of his mouth moved, almost a smile. He pressed his hand briefly to the small of her back, and then he was moving ahead of her, already pulling out his phone, already becoming the other version of himself, the one that existed in these rooms. Naomi straightened her coat and followed him inside. The entry hall was the size of her first apartment. Marble floor, high ceilings, a chandelier that cost more than most people's cars. Evelyn Kwan stood near the base of the staircase in a cream-colored dress that would not have been out of place at a state dinner. She was a tall woman with a sharp, carefully maintained face, the kind of face that smiled often and warmly at people she considered important, and that did something slightly different for everyone else. "Adrian." She kissed both his cheeks. "You look tired." "I'm fine, Mom." "You're always fine." She finally let her eyes shift to Naomi, and the shift was so small that anyone watching casually would have missed it. A degree or two of something. Not hostility. Evelyn was too practiced for that. Just a particular kind of stillness, like a door closing very quietly. Naomi, you made it. Not glad you made it. Not wonderful to see you. Just, you made it. Like Naomi's presence was something logistical rather than personal. I did, Naomi said pleasantly. She had learned pleasant. She had worn it so many times by now, it almost fit. Thank you for having me. Of course. Another smile. The door closed a little more. Vivian came from somewhere deeper in the house. Adrian's aunt, his mother's younger sister, a woman who wore perfume like a warning and had opinions about everything that concerned her and several things that didn't. She embraced Adrian warmly and then looked at Naomi the way you look at a piece of furniture you're not sure about. That dress is bold, Vivian said. Naomi was wearing a deep burgundy dress that she had spent 20 minutes choosing. She had worn it before and received 3 compliments on it. Thank you, she said. Vivian had not meant it as a compliment. They both knew that. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, a long table with seating for 12, tonight occupied by only 6. Adrian at one end, his grandmother Helena at the other, barely 5 feet tall, 78 years old, the kind of woman who had lived long enough to become her own myth. She sat at the head of the table the way monarchs used to sit at them, perfectly still, watching everything, saying less than you expected. She acknowledged Naomi with a small nod when they were introduced. The nod you give to something you've already decided about. Dinner began. For the first 20 minutes, it was almost manageable. The kind of dinner party conversation that existed as performance. Compliments about the food, observations about the season, a brief discussion about some gallery opening in Manhattan that Naomi could actually contribute to, though Evelyn changed the subject when she started to. Adrian talked mostly with his uncle James, who was the only person at the table who seemed genuinely uncomplicated. A quiet man who liked sports and didn't have an agenda. Naomi caught Adrian looking at her twice during the first course. She gave him the smile she'd practiced, the one that said, "Everything is fine." He gave her a look back that said, "I'm not entirely convinced," and then James said something about the football game, and Adrian let himself be redirected. She almost relaxed. She shouldn't have. It started with the bread. Evelyn waited until Adrian was mid-conversation with James and the server had just refilled everyone's glasses. And then she said, addressing Naomi in that particular social register that is technically polite and functionally a scalpel. "How is the gallery doing? I imagine the market must be so difficult right now." "It's actually strong," Naomi said. "We had our best quarter in 3 years this fall." "How wonderful." The pause was only 2 seconds. Of course, Adrian has been very generous in his support. Naomi kept her expression even. Adrian had not financed her gallery, not even close. He'd offered once at the beginning, and she'd declined because she'd been building that business since she was 26, and she knew exactly what it would mean for every success to have his name attached to it. "I've been lucky to have a good team," she said. Luck. Evelyn repeated the word like she found it charming in a small, sad way. "Of course." Across the table, Vivian was watching. "It must be an adjustment," she said, picking up her wine glass. "Coming from a background like yours into all of this." She gestured vaguely. It was a gesture that encompassed the chandelier, the silverware, the house, the family, and by implication, the enormous distance Naomi must have traveled to arrive here. Naomi had grown up in the top unit of a brownstone in Brooklyn. Her mother was a school teacher and her father had been a contractor who built things with his hands. She was not from poverty. She was not from destitution. She was from the kind of background that these women had decided to translate into something lesser, so that she would always be standing slightly lower. "Every life has its adjustments," Naomi said. She kept her voice easy. She had learned that too. Helena, at the far end of the table, had said nothing yet. She lifted her water glass with the slow deliberateness of someone who knows people watch her, set it down, and said, not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly, "Your family is from Brooklyn?" "Yes, ma'am." That was all. Just But somehow that single syllable contained a complete thought, and everyone at the table heard it. Adrian's Uncle James shifted in his seat. He looked at his plate. Naomi picked up her fork. She was not going to cry at the dinner table. She had not cried at this table in 2 years of marriage, and she was not going to start tonight, Not when she was carrying something that still felt miraculous and terrifying and entirely hers. That small white envelope waiting in her coat pocket like a secret that was running out of time. Adrian said something to James. His voice was even, his attention apparently still on the conversation, but under the table his hand appeared at Naomi's knee. Not asking anything, not making a scene, just there. A weight, an anchor. She placed her hand over his and pressed once. He pressed back. Dinner continued, and then Adrian's phone lit up. He looked down, frowned slightly, and said, "I'm sorry. I need to take this. It'll be 5 minutes." He stood, kissed Naomi's temple, and left the room. 5 minutes. She needed him to be back in 4. She felt the shift at the table the way you feel weather change before it rains. A different kind of air. Evelyn set down her fork with a small, definitive click. Vivian refilled her own wine glass and didn't offer the bottle to Naomi. Helena's eyes moved from the door Adrian had walked through and settled onto Naomi the way a spotlight settles, finding her, fixing her, refusing to let her be anything but visible. "He worries about you," Evelyn said. "He tries not to show it, but he worries." "That's kind of him," Naomi said. She was measuring every word now. "A man like Adrian has a great deal to protect." Evelyn folded her hands on the table. "His position, his name, the future of this family. These things matter more than sentiment eventually. Every woman who has been in your position has learned that. Every woman who has been in your position." There it was. The reminder that there had been others, that Naomi was not exceptional, just current. "I understand that family is important to Adrian," Naomi said. "Do you?" Vivian's voice had gone somewhere new, less social, more direct. "Do you understand what this family has built? What it's required? What it costs?" She set her wine glass down. "Women have come through that door before you. Beautiful women, accomplished women, women who understood what they were marrying into. None of them lasted, Naomi, not because of anything Adrian chose, because this family requires something particular." She let that sit. "And you are lovely, genuinely. But lovely isn't particular." The table was very quiet. Naomi looked at Vivian steadily. "Is there something specific you'd like to say to me?" Helena moved then. A slight shift in her chair, and everyone's attention went to her automatically. You couldn't help it. She had that kind of gravity. She looked at Naomi the way a person looks at a document they're reading for the last time before filing it away. "You are not what this family needs," Helena said. "That is not cruelty. It is fact. Adrian has responsibilities that extend beyond what he feels. And the women in this family have always understood the difference between what a man wants and what he requires." Her voice was calm. It was calm the way something is calm when it has already made up its mind. "You are a guest here, Naomi. You have been a guest for 2 years, and guests eventually go home." The word landed in Naomi's chest like a stone dropped into still water. Guest. Not wife. Not daughter-in-law. Not mother of the grandchild she hadn't told them about yet. Guest. She pressed her hand flat against the table. She didn't say anything yet because she knew that if she opened her mouth in this exact moment, the thing that came out would not be pleasant. And she had spent 2 years choosing pleasant, and she wasn't ready to let go of it tonight. Not in this room, not with Adrian 20 feet away, somewhere in this house, believing everything was fine because she had always told him it was. Vivian stood. Evelyn followed. Helena did not stand. She didn't need to. She simply inclined her head toward the hallway that led toward the back of the house. "There's something we'd like to show you," Evelyn said. "Outside, it's a nice evening." It wasn't a question. Naomi looked at the doorway Adrian had gone through. She looked at her coat hanging near the entry, her coat with the small white envelope still inside it. She thought about standing up and walking in the other direction, finding Adrian, taking his hand, letting him handle whatever this was. She thought about it, and then she thought, "I have been handling this alone for 2 years. 5 more minutes won't break me." She stood. She followed them out to the terrace. The pool lights were on. That underwater blue-white glow that made everything look slightly unreal. The autumn air had teeth in it. Naomi crossed her arms over her chest and told herself it was only the cold. There was a table near the pool, a glass table with a folder on it. Evelyn placed her hand on the folder. She didn't open it yet. She looked at Naomi with something that was almost respect. the professional respect of one competent person for another who is about to receive difficult information. You understand that what Adrian does, what this family does, is not simply business, Evelyn began. The connections we maintain, the relationships we protect, require a very specific kind of wife, someone who understands the culture, the obligations, the history of this family. I understand my husband, Naomi said. You understand the version of Adrian that loves you, Vivian said. That's not the same thing. Evelyn opened the folder. Inside was a document, multiple pages, dense with text, formal language arranged in careful paragraphs. At the top, a number that Naomi had to look at twice before her brain processed it. $8 million. She stared at the page for a long moment. Then she looked up at Evelyn. You're serious. We are always serious, Evelyn said. Leave within 72 hours, Vivian said, like she was reading from a list. Leave the country. Terminate contact with Adrian, with the family, with all associated business interests. The funds transfer immediately. Clean, private, no press, no complications. Naomi looked down at the document again. $8 million. She had built a gallery that turned over 7 figures annually. She had a waiting list for her emerging artist program. She had a home she loved, and a husband she loved, and a secret in her coat pocket that she hadn't told anyone yet, and standing here in the cold, next to a swimming pool, a woman who had never once genuinely welcomed her into this family was offering her money to disappear. No, Naomi said. Evelyn blinked, just once, like a small recalibration. Naomi? No. Her voice was steady. She was surprised how steady it was. You can close the folder. Vivian looked at Evelyn, the look of two people who had planned for a no and were now moving to the next prepared position. 10 million, Vivian said. No. Naomi. Evelyn's voice shifted down into something that sounded almost tender, which was somehow the most frightening thing yet. I know you believe Adrian loves you. I don't doubt that he does, in the way that he is capable of. But love in this family has a shelf life. Men like my son require wives who can stand beside them in every room. Not some rooms. Every room. You know, in your heart, that you are not that woman. We're giving you the chance to leave with your dignity and a future. Naomi felt something tighten in her chest, something that was not grief and was not anger, but was somewhere in between, a kind of cold, clear fury that she had been holding in her body for so long she'd almost forgotten it was there. She thought about the dinner table, about lovely isn't particular, about guest. She thought about every time she had smiled and swallowed and chosen pleasant. She thought about the envelope in her coat pocket. I am that woman, she said quietly, whether any of you believe it or not. Helena, who had not spoken since they came outside, took a single step forward. She moved the way old women move when they've decided to stop watching and start acting. She looked at Naomi with those still, dark eyes. 12 million, Helena said, and you may keep the child. But Adrian's name will not appear on any documentation. His connection to the pregnancy ends here, in this conversation, tonight. The world went very quiet. Naomi heard the water in the pool shifting against the edges. She heard a car somewhere on the road beyond the gate. She heard her own breathing. They knew. Somehow they knew. Her hands had gone cold. Not from the air. How? Dr. Sato's office has been with this family for 30 years, Evelyn said simply. We know. 12 weeks. 3 days since she'd seen that photograph. She hadn't told Adrian. She hadn't told her mother. She had told no one. Not a sister, not a friend, not the assistant who covered the gallery desk on Thursdays. She had carried it completely alone because she wanted to give it to him properly, and instead it was here, on this terrace, in the mouths of women who were treating her pregnancy like a liability to be managed. Something in her shifted, not broke, did not break. Shifted, the way tectonic things shift, deep and slow and enormous. She looked at Helena. She looked at Evelyn. She looked at Vivian. And then she looked at the $12 million document sitting on the glass table in the cold blue light of a pool that no one was swimming in, and she thought, Adrian would burn this house down if he knew. And then she thought, that is exactly why he can't know. She straightened her shoulders. Keep your money, Naomi said. Every dollar of it. I don't want what can be bought. I want what's already mine. She turned away from the table. She did not run. did not storm, did not give them the satisfaction of a dramatic exit. She walked, at her own pace, in her own direction, toward the glass corridor that connected the terrace to the east wing of the house. What she didn't know was that inside that corridor, in the dark space between the exterior lights and the interior glow, a man stood very still. His face was unreadable. His hands were at his sides. He had come looking for his wife and had found something else entirely. And he had heard every word. He had been standing there for 4 minutes and 30 seconds. He knew the exact number because somewhere in the back of his mind, the part that never fully turned off, the part that had kept him alive in rooms where most men didn't walk out, he had been counting. An old habit, the kind you developed when time was the only thing you had precise control over. 4 minutes and 30 seconds since he had come through the east wing looking for his wife, following the sound of voices to the glass corridor, stopping when he recognized his mother's particular register, that tone she used when she was managing something. 4 minutes and 30 seconds of standing in the dark between the interior light and the pool glow, watching 3 women he had trusted with his entire life try to buy his wife's disappearance. Now Naomi had turned away from the table and was walking toward the corridor, toward him. Adrian didn't move. He stayed in the shadow of the corridor, pressed flat against the wall beside the door frame, and watched her come. She walked the way she always walked when she was holding something in, straight spine, chin level, each step deliberate and controlled. A woman who had decided that her body would not betray what her face was working hard to hide. He knew that walk. He had seen it in mirrors. He had worn it himself in rooms full of men who were waiting for him to show them something they could use. She pushed through the corridor door and almost walked directly into him. She stopped. One sharp intake of breath. Her eyes went to his face, and whatever she saw there made her go very still, the way animals go still when they sense something large and unpredictable in the dark. "Adrian, how long?" he said. Not a question. The syntax was wrong for a question. It was something else, a demand wearing a question's clothes. Naomi looked at him. She looked at the door behind him, the one that led back into the main house. She looked at his hands. He realized he'd let them close into fists sometime in the last 4 minutes, without noticing. He opened them deliberately. "How long have they been doing this?" he said again. Her jaw shifted. Something moved behind her eyes, something that was exhausted and careful, and underneath both of those things, relieved in a way that looked almost like grief. "How much did you hear?" "Everything from the 8 million. The sound she made was not quite a laugh. It was the sound of someone who had been carrying something for a very long time and had just been told they could put it down, except putting it down wasn't actually a relief because of what it meant for everyone standing nearby. "Months," she said. Adrian looked at her. "Since the first family dinner after the wedding," she said. "Small things at first, comments, the way they talk around me instead of to me, the way the staff started treating me differently when you weren't in the room." She pressed her fingers against the side of her neck, a gesture he recognized. She did it when she was choosing words carefully. "Tonight was the first time they put money on a table." "The first time they put money on a table in front of you," he said. She heard the distinction. Her chin came up slightly. "Yes." Adrian turned away from her. He turned toward the glass that looked out over the terrace, where his mother and aunt were still standing near the pool, where his grandmother had lowered herself back into the chair she'd been brought outside, where the folder with $12 million of Kwan family money still sat on the glass table catching the light. He looked at them for a long moment. His mother was saying something to Vivian. Whatever it was, Vivian nodded and reached for the folder. Vivian starting to close it, efficiently, like tidying up after a meeting that had gone as expected. His grandmother was looking at the water. None of them were looking at the corridor. None of them thought they had anything to look for. "How often?" he said. His voice was very quiet. That particular quiet that people who knew him had learned to pay attention to. "Adrian, I'm not angry at you. I am asking you a direct question." He turned back to her. "How often?" Naomi met his eyes. She was tired. He could see it now. Not the cosmetic kind of tired, not the kind that foundation fixed in the morning, the kind that lived in the muscles around a person's eyes, the kind that accumulated over months of holding a face in position. "Every time you left the room," she said, "at every family event, every dinner, every holiday, every time you stepped away to take a call, She paused. Which is often. That landed. He felt it land. He took a single breath and let it out slowly through his nose. You told me everything was fine. It was manageable. Naomi. I was managing it, Adrian. That is different from it being fine, and you know it. Her voice cracked on the last three words just slightly, and she pressed her lips together hard. She would not do this in a corridor. He could see her deciding that. I knew what would happen if I told you. I knew you would. You would do exactly what that look on your face right now says you're about to do. And I was not going to be the reason you blew up your relationship with your family. They are not. He stopped, started again. They don't get to do this to you. I know that. They don't get to do this to my wife. Adrian, I know. $12 million. He said it the way you say something that doesn't make sense even when you say it out loud. They offered you $12 million to take our child and disappear. The corridor went very quiet. Naomi's hand moved, a small, reflexive motion toward her coat pocket. She caught it, stopped herself. He watched the motion and then looked at her face. Our child, he said. She held his gaze. She didn't answer immediately. He watched something move across her face, complicated, layered, the expression of a person deciding whether the moment they've been waiting for has arrived by accident or not at all. Then she reached into her coat pocket and took out a small white envelope. She held it for a moment before she put it in his hand. He opened it. He took out the photograph. He looked at it for a long time. The pool light shifted outside. His mother laughed at something. That practiced silvery laugh she used at events. The one that didn't involve her eyes. The sound came through the glass like something from another world. When Adrian looked up from the photograph, his face had changed. Not dramatically. Not the way faces changed in films. It changed the way faces change when something true and irreversible has occurred. A subtle rearrangement, the way a room looks different after one piece of furniture has moved. 12 weeks, she said quietly. I found out 3 days ago. I was going to tell you tonight. I wanted to do it somewhere that was just ours. She gestured vaguely at the corridor, the house beyond, the terrace where his family was still standing. This was not what I had in mind. Adrian looked at the photograph again. Then he placed it very carefully back in the envelope and held it out to her. Keep it safe, he said. She took it. He watched her put it back in her pocket and hold it there for a moment, her hand pressing against the outside of the fabric. And something about that small gesture, guarding it, the way you guard something that can't protect itself, made his chest feel like it was being compressed from both sides. He turned back to the glass. Stay here, he said. Adrian, Naomi. He looked at her over his shoulder. Please, just stay here for 5 minutes. She looked at him for a long moment, reading his face the way she always read him, thoroughly, without pretending she wasn't doing it. What are you going to do? I'm going to have a conversation with my family. That's not specific enough. I'm aware. He turned toward the corridor door that led back into the house. 5 minutes. Adrian. Her voice stopped him. He looked back. She was standing in the middle of the corridor with her hands at her sides, and that particular expression she wore when she was going to say something she meant completely. Don't do this for me. Do it because it's right. There's a difference, and you need to know which one it is before you walk out that door. He considered that. Both, he said, and then he walked out. The hallway from the east wing back toward the terrace ran the length of the house, past 3 closed doors and a stretch of framed family photographs that he had walked past 1,000 times without looking at. Tonight he looked. His grandfather, formal and severe in a photograph from 1974. His father, younger than Adrian was now, standing beside a car in a parking lot somewhere, squinting into the sun. His mother in a wedding photograph, standing straight, composed, the smile of a woman who had decided what her life was going to look like and had built it accordingly. He pushed open the door to the terrace. The 3 women turned. His grandmother turned last, slowly, deliberately, with the unhurried movement of someone who does not feel the need to react quickly to anything. She looked at him the way she always looked at him, with an assessor's eyes, measuring, calculating, recording. Adrian, his mother said. She smiled, automatically. It was a reflex. I know what you were doing. He walked to the table. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He had learned a long time ago that volume was for people who needed to compensate for something. and he had never needed to compensate. He looked at the folder. He picked it up. He looked at the number on the top page one more time. $12 million. He dropped the folder into the pool. It hit the water flat and opened immediately, pages spreading, separating, the ink beginning to bleed before they even started to sink. The folder itself went under in about 3 seconds. The pages took longer, floating at first, then absorbing water, going transparent around the edges, slowly pulling under. Nobody on the terrace made a sound. His mother's face had gone a color he had never seen it go before. His aunt was very still. His grandmother looked at the pool and then looked at him, and her expression did not change, which was somehow the most unsettling thing about her. "That was a legal document," Vivian finally said. Her voice had a tremor in it that she was trying to control and mostly failing. "It was a piece of paper," Adrian said, "with my family's money attached to it, which means it was mine to dispose of." "Adrian," his mother started, "I need you to be quiet right now, Mom." He said it without heat, just the fact. "I need everyone on this terrace to be quiet while I say what I came out here to say." The garden beyond the terrace was dark. The pool lights pulsed slightly underwater. Somewhere above them, a window in the east wing still showed light. The corridor where Naomi was standing, somewhere inside that golden rectangle. He didn't look up. "I've been running this family's money for 9 years," he said. "The businesses, the properties, the accounts that Vivian and my mother use to maintain the lives they currently live. I want to be clear about something, because I think somewhere along the way it got confused." He looked at his mother. "I did that because I love you, not because it entitled you to make decisions about my life." Evelyn opened her mouth. "I heard you tonight," Adrian said. "I heard you at the table. I heard what you said to Naomi about her background. I heard the thing you said about other women. I heard every word on this terrace from the moment she walked outside." He paused. "I heard what you did with Dr. Sato's office." His mother's composure finally cracked. Not completely. Evelyn Kwan did not come fully apart in any scenario. But something in her face shifted, and for a moment he could see through it to the woman underneath, who was calculating very fast and arriving at bad numbers. "We were protecting you," she said. "Everything we have done, every difficult conversation, we were protecting this family." "From what?" He asked it genuinely, not rhetorically. "From what, Mom? Say it plainly." The silence lasted too long. Vivian said it. Because Vivian had always been the one who said the thing that nobody else wanted to say, which was sometimes a quality and sometimes just cruelty wearing efficiency's face. "She isn't what this family is," Vivian said. "She isn't from our world. She doesn't understand our culture. She is my wife," Adrian said. "There have been other wives in this family who, she is carrying my child." His voice didn't rise. It just got very flat, very clean, each word like something placed down with precision. "And you called Dr. Sato's office. You found out about my child before I did. And your response, your first response, was to offer her $12 million to make sure that child would never carry my name." He looked at his grandmother. Helena had not moved. She was sitting in the chair they'd brought outside for her hands folded in her lap, watching him with those dark, completely composed eyes. She was the only person on this terrace who was not afraid of him, and they both knew why. Because she had helped make him what he was, and some part of her still believed that what she had made, she could control. "You built a family," she said. Her voice was steady as old stone. "I built a family. Your grandfather and I sacrificed things that you will never understand in order to create what this family is. The standards we maintain exist for a reason, Adrian. They have always existed for a reason." "I know your reasons," he said. "Then you understand. I understand that you looked at the woman I married and decided she was insufficient before you ever looked at who she actually was." He took a slow breath. "I understand that for 2 years, while I was in rooms full of dangerous men, Naomi was handling a different kind of danger in this house. Alone. Because she didn't want me to have to choose." He stopped. "Well, she doesn't have to protect me from that choice anymore." His mother made a sound, something between a word and an exhaled breath. "Adrian, think about what you're saying. You have responsibilities. You have a reputation, the people we work with, the relationships that maintain everything you've—" "Mom," he said her name quietly. The way you say someone's name when you need them to hear you, and not the noise around the words. I need you to understand something. The $12 million you just offered my wife. The businesses you assumed were adjacent to the family. My name on those accounts. He looked at her steadily. All of that is going to change, starting tomorrow. The temperature on the terrace seemed to drop by several degrees, independently of the weather. What does that mean? Vivian said, very carefully. It means that the account access you both have through my holding company is being reviewed tomorrow morning. It means the property on East 74th that you use as your primary residence, Vivian, is held in a trust that I control. It means the operations that Evelyn has been drawing from for the last 6 years are going to require new signatures. He looked at his mother. My signature, which is going to require my personal involvement in every decision, going forward. His mother's face went very still. You wouldn't. I already have. He slid his phone back into his jacket pocket. Upstairs in the east corridor, he could see the shape of Naomi's shadow against the lit window. Still there, waiting. I made 3 calls while I was standing in that corridor listening to you. My attorney will have paperwork ready before midnight. This is because of her. Vivian's voice had gone tight and small. You are doing this because of a woman you've known for 2 years, and you are willing to— I'm willing, he said, because of who she is, not in spite of it. He looked at Helena one final time. His grandmother had not moved. She was watching him with an expression he could not entirely read, and that unsettled him because he had been reading Helena's expression since he was 8 years old. This one was new. You are making a mistake, Helena said, quietly, with absolute certainty, the way you state the weather. Maybe, Adrian said, but it's mine to make. He turned and walked back into the house. The hallway seemed longer going back. His footsteps were the only sound. He passed the family photographs again, didn't look at them this time, and pushed through the door into the east wing. Naomi was standing exactly where he had left her. She looked at his face. She searched it the way she always did, looking for the information he hadn't said yet. Are you all right? She said. It was such a Naomi question. Not what happened, not what did you do. First, are you all right? He felt something in his chest give way slightly. Not a crack, just a release. Come here, he said. She crossed the corridor to him and he pulled her in. His arms around her, her face pressed into his shoulder, her whole body tensing for 1 second and then releasing, that long exhale of someone who has been holding themselves up for a very long time in a place that required it. He held her there, didn't say anything for a moment. I'm sorry, he said into her hair. She shook her head against his shoulder. I didn't see it, for 2 years. He said it flat, no excuse in it. I didn't look hard enough. I should have. That's mine. She pulled back slightly to look at him. Her eyes were dry. Naomi did not cry in positions she didn't choose, but there was something around them, in the small muscles there, that told him how much she had been carrying. What happened out there? Consequences, he said. She looked at him for another moment. Then she looked down at her coat pocket, where the small white envelope was. She put her hand over it, pressing lightly. She's ours, he said. She looked up. How do you know it's a she? I don't. He reached out and pressed his hand over hers, over the pocket, both of them pressing lightly over the photograph they couldn't see. But I want a girl who looks like you. Naomi's expression did something complicated. She looked away for a second, jaw working. Then she looked back. Your family is not going to forgive this easily, she said. I know. Your mother is going to make this very difficult. I know that too. Adrian. She held his gaze. I need you to be doing this because it's the right thing. Not in the heat of— I was in that corridor for 4 minutes, he said. I had plenty of time to get cold. He took her hand properly, laced his fingers through hers. I know exactly what I'm doing. She looked at him. He looked back. Somewhere below them, in the main part of the house, a door opened and closed. One of the women coming back inside. The sound of heels on marble, distant and then receding. The house settling back into itself. Okay, Naomi said. Okay? Okay, she said again. Less a word and more a decision. He squeezed her hand once. She squeezed back. They stood in the corridor together for another moment, just the two of them, just this, the pool lights still throwing their blue-white glow up through the glass somewhere below. He was thinking about phone calls he still needed to make, about the specific face his attorney would make at 11 o'clock on a weeknight, about the sequence of what came next, the accounts, the property, the restructuring of arrangements that had been built. He could see now, on an assumption that he would never fully pay attention. He had been paying attention tonight. What he did not know, what neither of them knew as they stood in that corridor with their hands linked and the house quiet around them, was that downstairs, at the base of the East Wing staircase, Evelyn was standing very still with her phone pressed to her ear, and on the other end of that call was a man whose name did not appear in any Kwan family document, but who had been connected to this family since long before Adrian was old enough to know what those connections meant. And Evelyn was speaking in a low, controlled voice, the voice she used when she had moved past emotion and arrived at something operational. "It's further than I expected," she was saying. "We need to talk about what comes next." She paused, listening. "Yes," she said. "All of it. Whatever it takes." She ended the call. She stood at the base of the staircase and looked up toward the East Wing, where the light was still on, where her son and his wife were standing in a corridor making decisions that they believed were theirs to make. She slipped her phone into her bag. She walked toward the dining room where the rest of the evening still needed to be managed. And in her mind, she was already composing the first move of whatever came after tonight. Because Evelyn Kwan had not maintained her position in this family for 31 years by accepting the word no from anyone, including the call Evelyn made at the base of the staircase lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Adrian found out about it 3 days later. Not from his mother. Not from anyone in the family. From a man named Cho Seung-hyun, who ran security operations out of a building in Flushing that officially housed an import consulting firm and unofficially housed everything else. Cho had been with the Kwan organization since before Adrian took over, and his loyalty was not to the family name. It was to Adrian specifically, a distinction that had never mattered until now. Cho sent a text at 6:47 in the morning. 4 words. "We need to meet." Adrian read it in bed, Naomi still asleep beside him, her breathing even and deep in the way it had been since they'd come home from Long Island 3 nights ago. She had slept better these last 3 nights than she had in months. He'd noticed it, the way she wasn't waking at 2 in the morning anymore, the way her jaw wasn't tight when he looked at her in the morning light. He had not told her what he was still unraveling about the damage that had been done in the time he hadn't been paying attention. He didn't want to hand her problems before he understood their shape. He got up carefully, got dressed in the dark, left her sleeping. He met Cho at a diner in Queens that smelled like coffee and industrial cleaner and had booths with high enough backs that no one could see who you were sitting with. Cho was already there when Adrian arrived, both hands wrapped around a mug, a plate of untouched toast in front of him. He was a compact man in his late 40s with a face that didn't move much and eyes that moved constantly. When Adrian slid into the booth across from him, Cho's eyes went to the door, the window, the counter, and back. "Talk," Adrian said. Cho put both hands flat on the table. "The call your mother made Monday night. The man she called is Park Jin-woo." Adrian went very still. Park Jin-woo was not a name that existed in any conversation Adrian had allowed in his presence for the last 4 years. Park was from the previous generation's structure, the part of the organization that Adrian had been systematically cutting away from for 3 years, the part that operated in ways he had decided his family would no longer operate in. Park was connected to things that Adrian had spent considerable time and money ensuring the Kwan name was no longer connected to. Park was, in the simplest possible terms, a problem that Adrian had believed was contained. "How sure are you?" Adrian said when the number matches a burner registered to one of his known associates. The timing of the call matches a location ping from Park's regular security detail in Flushing. Cho picked up his coffee mug and set it back down without drinking from it. "I'm sure." Adrian looked at the table. There was a ring from a previous coffee cup on the laminate surface, imperfectly wiped away. He looked at it the way you look at something while your brain is working somewhere else entirely. His mother had called Park Jin-woo. His mother, who had been at every dinner where Adrian announced another separation from the old structure, who had smiled and nodded and said she understood, who had kissed his cheek at Christmas and told him she was proud of the man he was becoming. His mother had the direct line of a man that Adrian had essentially declared a closed door. What did Park say to her? Adrian asked. We don't have the content. We have the connection. How long has she had that number? Cho's expression said, longer than tonight. He didn't say it out loud, which meant the number was bad enough that he was deciding how to frame it. The same number was used in a call 8 months ago, a call that lasted 9 minutes, originating from the estate landline. 8 months ago. Adrian ran through 8 months ago. 8 months ago, Naomi had told him she wanted to expand the gallery's back room into a proper exhibition space. He had offered to finance it, and she had refused. 8 months ago, he had been in the middle of a restructuring deal that required 6 weeks of his attention and a lot of time in rooms without his phone. 8 months ago, Naomi had gone to a family dinner alone because he'd had a conflict, and she had come home and said it was fine. It was fine. What do you think Park agreed to? Adrian said. Cho pressed his lips together. Based on the timing and what I know about how Park operates, I think your mother asked him for something that would apply pressure, not violence. Park is smarter than that with your name involved. But leverage. Something to make your current position untenable enough that you'd want to restructure your personal life along with your business life. Define leverage. That's what I'm still working on. Cho met his eyes. But Adrian, if Park has been in contact with your family for 8 months, there may be things attributed to the Quan name that you don't know about. Things done in the space you created when you were occupied. The diner was starting to fill up. A woman with a stroller came in through the front door. A man in a delivery uniform sat at the counter. Normal Tuesday morning in Queens, the city conducting its business around a booth where the floor was dropping out of Adrian Quan's world. Find out what they have, he said. Already looking. Fast, Cho. I know. Adrian left $40 on the table for a cup of coffee he hadn't ordered and walked out. He drove back to Manhattan slowly, which was unusual for him. He drove like he was thinking, which he was. He drove like a man who was rearranging the architecture of what he understood to be true. His mother had not simply reacted to him and Naomi on Monday night. His mother had been building something for 8 months, quietly, in the spaces he had left unattended. The offer on the terrace, the $12 million, the settlement agreement, the business with Dr. Sato's office, that had not been a spontaneous act of family panic. That had been the visible surface of something that went much further down. He got home at 8:43. Naomi was in the kitchen, standing at the counter with a mug of tea and her phone, reading something. She had her glasses on. She wore them in the morning sometimes, before her contacts, large round frames that she claimed she found in a vintage shop, but that he suspected she had paid actual money for. She looked up when he came in. You were up early, she said. Couldn't sleep. She looked at him the way she looked at him when she knew he was leaving something out, but had decided to wait for him to bring it himself. She went back to her phone. He stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at her. The glasses, the mug, the particular way she stood with her weight shifted to one hip when she was relaxed. And he thought about 8 months. He thought about all the mornings she had stood in this kitchen while his family was building something in the dark. Naomi. She looked up again. I need to tell you something. She set her phone down. She took her glasses off and set those down too, a gesture that said, I am fully here, say what you need to say. He told her about Cho. He told her about Park Jin-woo, not the full history. That was a long and unpleasant history that they had discussed once at the beginning when he had been honest with her about what he was and what he was trying not to continue being, but enough. He told her about the 8 months. He told her about the pattern Cho had described. She listened without interrupting. She held her mug with both hands and looked at a point somewhere near his collarbone while he talked, the way she did when she was processing something that required more than the surface of her attention. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. So Monday night wasn't the beginning, she said. No. They've been building this for 8 months, possibly longer. She set the mug down on the counter, carefully, with the precise, deliberate movement of a person controlling something they don't want to lose control of. And Park Jin-woo, you said you'd cut ties with him 3 years ago. I did cut ties. Officially, structurally. He looked at her. I didn't consider the possibility that someone with access to my name and my history would go looking for him independently. Your mother. Yes. She turned away from him. Not dramatically, she just turned, facing the window over the sink, looking out at the gray October morning. He watched her back, watched the slight rise and fall of her breathing. "What does he have?" she said. "This Park person. What could he give your mother that she'd want?" "I don't know yet. Cho is working on it." "But you have a guess." He did. He had several guesses, none of which he wanted to say out loud because saying them out loud would require him to also say, "And if I'm right, the consequences are not small." "I have theories," he said. "I'll know more in 24 hours. She turned back to face him. Her expression was the one he had come to think of as her gallery face, the one she used when a piece she'd been counting on fell through, or when an artist she'd invested in made a decision she couldn't support. Controlled. Functional. Hiding something underneath that she was choosing not to perform. "Is my safety a concern?" she said. "Naomi, Adrian, is my safety a concern? Direct answer." He looked at her for a moment. Park doesn't move against family members. He never has. It's his one consistent boundary, and it's practical, not moral. He knows what happens to people who cross that line. "I'm the family member your mother is trying to remove from the family." That landed. He felt it land. "You are my wife," he said. "Whatever my mother's intentions are, Park knows what I am. He won't touch you." She looked at him steadily. "You sound like you're trying to convince yourself." He didn't answer that because she wasn't wrong, and she knew when he was lying and knew when he was omitting, and he wasn't going to do either in this kitchen, in the morning, with her standing there in her reading glasses, with 12 weeks of something irreplaceable in her body. "I'm going to handle this," he said. "I know you are." She picked up her mug again. "I just need you to remember that handling it and keeping me in the dark about it are not the same thing anymore. Not after Monday." "Understood." "And Adrian." She met his eyes. "Whatever Park has, whatever your mother gave him access to, I need you to be prepared for the possibility that it's worse than you're currently expecting." She went back to her phone. The conversation was over, not because she had ended it emotionally, but because she had said what needed to be said, and she was not the kind of person who repeated herself. He stood there for another moment. Then he took out his own phone and called his attorney. The 24 hours he'd promised himself took 31. Cho called at 1:40 in the morning, 2 days after the diner meeting. Adrian was awake. He had barely slept, had spent the intervening time reorganizing account structures and making calls, and sitting in his office at 11 at night, looking at financial records that he was only now examining with the specific attention they deserved. He answered on the first ring. "Tell me," he said. Cho was quiet for 1 second, the kind of second that contains bad information looking for a way out. "Park has documentation," Cho said, "going back 4 years. Transactions that are attributed to Kwan Family Holdings, specifically to subsidiaries you separated from the main structure when you started the restructuring. The problem is the paperwork trail. The way the separations were structured, some of the documentation is ambiguous. It could be read 2 ways. How bad is the ambiguity? Bad enough that someone with a reason to present it badly could make it look like the restructuring was cosmetic, like you separated from the illegal operations on paper but maintained effective control." Adrian closed his eyes for 3 seconds, opened them. "That's not what happened." "I know that," Cho said. "Your attorney knows that. But Park has 4 years of documentation and a forensic accountant who has apparently been working on this for 6 months, and they have constructed a version of events that, if presented to the right people, in the right context, would require a significant amount of your time and money and attention to disprove." He paused. "And your name would not come out clean on the other side, even if you won." "The FBI," Adrian said, "or the DA, or both." Another pause. "Or no one official. Park might just need to put the threat on the table, force you into a position where your choices are. Accept a version of your personal life that your mother has pre-approved, or face a very complicated few years." Adrian stood up from his desk. He walked to the window. His apartment was on the 31st floor, and at this hour Manhattan was all lit windows and moving lights, the city running itself without any concern for what was happening inside one man's life at 1:40 in the morning. His mother had given Park Jin-woo 6 months of preparation time. She had not panicked on the terrace Monday night. She had been delivering an ultimatum from a position she believed was already fortified. The $12 million was the polite version, the version intended to resolve things cleanly. And when Naomi had refused, and when Adrian had walked out and dropped the paperwork in the pool and made his phone calls, she had moved to the next prepared position, which was this. Mutually assured destruction, built from his own history, held in the hands of a man he had thought he was finished with. "Where's Park now?" he said. "Flushing. Regular location. Is he expecting contact from me?" "I think he's expecting you to make contact through intermediaries and ask about terms." Cho's voice was careful. "Which is what he'd want. He wants you negotiating. He wants you in a position where you're asking him what it costs." "What does it cost?" Adrian said. Not because he was going to pay it, because he needed to know what shape his mother's ask had taken. Cho was quiet for a moment. "Your mother's position is that the offer for Monday still stands. 8 million. Naomi leaves. The pregnancy is handled privately. You return to," her words, "appropriate family arrangements within 6 months." Adrian stood at the window for a long moment. Below him, a taxi changed lanes. A delivery truck stopped at a light. Someone on the street below was walking a dog, the dog stopping to investigate something at the base of a lamppost while the person on the other end of the leash waited with practiced patience. "She thinks I'll do it," he said. "She thinks the alternative is bad enough that you'll choose the path of least resistance." Cho let that sit for a moment. "She's used to you making practical choices. This isn't a practical situation." "No," Cho said. "It isn't." Adrian turned away from the window. His desk, his files, the organizational chart he'd been rebuilding for 3 days. All of it sitting in lamplight, the architecture of a life he had been trying to construct honestly, now with a bomb in the foundation installed by his own family. "I need everything Park has," he said. "Or everything you can get. Original documents, chain of custody, whoever prepared the forensic accounting, names, dates, how it was compiled." "Adrian, getting into Park's materials is—" "I know what it is. Can you do it?" A pause. "I can try." "Don't try. Do it or tell me you can't so I can find someone who can. Give me 48 hours. You have 36. He ended the call. He stood in his office for a moment longer, looking at nothing in particular. Then he walked down the hall to the bedroom door. It was closed. He pressed his palm flat against it for a moment, just that, just his hand on the door. And then he went back to his desk. He did not sleep that night. He was still at his desk when Naomi appeared in the office doorway at 6:15 in the morning, wearing one of his sweatshirts over her pajamas and carrying 2 mugs. She looked at his face and at the papers on his desk and at the coffee cups from the night before, and she didn't say, "I told you to sleep," or "How long have you been up?" or anything that required him to account for himself. She just set one of the mugs in front of him and sat down in the chair across from his desk, the chair normally reserved for people he was meeting with, and wrapped her hands around her own mug. "Tell me," she said. He told her. She listened without changing expression. She asked 2 questions. The first was about the nature of the documentation, and he explained it. The second was about Park specifically, not who he was, she knew enough about who he was, but about what his actual interest in this situation was. "He's not doing this for my mother," Adrian said. "He's using my mother. The leverage he has over me is something he's wanted for 4 years. He's wanted back in, not to the organization directly, because he knows I'd end him, but adjacent, connected enough to matter again. My mother just gave him the opening." Naomi looked at her mug. "So destroying your marriage is a means to an end for him, not the actual goal. He doesn't care about my marriage. He cares about positioning. And your mother." "My mother cares about my marriage," Adrian said. "Park cares about power. They want different things, and they're using each other." Naomi looked up from her mug. "That's a weakness." He looked at her. "If they want different things," she said, "and they're only allied because they both happen to need the same outcome right now, that alliance fractures the moment one of them gets what they want without the other." She tilted her head slightly, the particular angle that meant she was working through something. "Your mother doesn't know what Park actually wants, does she?" He thought about it. He thought about his mother, who was intelligent in the specific way of a woman who had spent 30 years managing a complex social and financial world, but who had no direct experience with how men like Park operated, who would have made the call in desperation and in anger, reached for the most powerful tool available, without fully examining what that tool was attached to. "No," he said slowly. "She knows Park has connections. She knows he has leverage on me. She thinks he's a gun she pointed at a problem." "But he's not a gun," Naomi said. "He's a gun with his own target." The morning light was coming through the office window now, pale and gray. The kind of October morning that looked clean but had no warmth in it. Adrian looked at his wife sitting across his desk in his sweatshirt with her tea, 8 weeks pregnant and sleep rumpled and working the geometry of his problem faster than he had managed all night. The documentation Park has, she said. Is any of it real? Like, is there anything in there that's actually what he says it is? There might be ambiguous transactions. The restructuring was complicated and some of the paper trails are… He stopped. There's one subsidiary. I closed it, but the closing documentation had a 2-year tail on some accounts because of the nature of what it held. During that tail, some transactions ran through that were legitimate but would look… Explain that to me like I don't know what a subsidiary is, she said. He explained it. She listened. She asked a follow-up question that was more specific than he expected, and he answered it, and she asked another one, and by the end of it she was holding her mug with one hand and had the other pressed flat on the desk in front of her. Your attorney needs to see all of that, she said. The closing documents, the tail transactions, the original restructuring plan, all of it, before Park moves, if Park moves. I know that. Does your attorney know about Park specifically? Not yet. Adrian. She said his name the way she said it when he was being careless. If Park presents this to anyone official, you need your attorney to already know the complete picture. Not to be surprised by it. Not to be receiving information at the same time as… I know, he said. Then why hasn't that call happened yet? He looked at her. He breathed out. Because once I make that call, this is officially a crisis. Right now it's still… It is a crisis, she said quietly. Not unkindly, just plainly. It has been a crisis since Monday night. The only thing that changes when you make the call is whether you're managing it or reacting to it. He looked at his desk, at the files, at the cold coffee from the night before. She was right. He knew she was right. He had spent the night, the long, sleepless, unproductive night, in the space between knowing and accepting, the space where you understand the shape of something but keep hoping the shape will change if you look at it long enough. It didn't change. He picked up his phone and called his attorney. The attorney's name was Douglas Park, no relation, and he answered on the third ring with the slightly thick voice of a man who had been asleep but kept his phone close because clients like Adrian Kwan called at unreasonable hours. What happened? He said. Not hello, not what time is it, just what happened. I need an emergency meeting, Adrian said. Today, as early as you can manage. 9 o'clock. Earlier. A pause, sheets rustling. 7:30, my office. I'll be there. He ended the call. Naomi was watching him. He looked at her, across the desk, in the early morning light, in his sweatshirt, with the particular expression she wore when she had been afraid of something and was trying not to show it because fear didn't help anyone. 7:30, he said. She nodded. She stood, picked up both mugs, and paused in the doorway. I'm coming with you. Naomi, I'm coming, she said. I am not sitting in this apartment waiting for someone to call me with information about my own life. She looked at him steadily. This is my crisis too. He looked at her for a moment. 7:30, he said. She nodded and went to get dressed. Douglas Park's office was on the 42nd floor of a building in Midtown, and at 7:28 in the morning it was already fully lit. Douglas himself in a suit that suggested he hadn't gone back to sleep after the call, a tray of coffee on the conference table, and a legal pad in front of him with 3 words already written at the top. Adrian and Naomi sat across from him. Adrian placed his phone on the table. He told Douglas everything, starting with Monday night and working forward. Douglas wrote. He didn't interrupt except to ask 3 specific questions about dates, and each time he asked, he wrote the answer in the margin of his pad. When Adrian finished, Douglas looked at his notes for a long moment. Then he looked up. Park Jin-woo, he said. Yes. And your mother made initial contact 8 months ago. At minimum. Douglas set his pen down. He had the expression of a man who was about to say something that he knew was going to change the texture of the room, and who was deciding whether to soften it or not, and choosing not to. Adrian, if Park has what your contact describes, and if he presents it to federal investigators, even under circumstances where you can ultimately disprove the narrative, the investigation itself would take between 18 months and 3 years. During that time, your legitimate business operations would be severely compromised, accounts frozen, partnerships disrupted. The security company you've been building would lose contracts because of the association with the investigation, even if you're completely cleared at the end of it. He looked at both of them. And we cannot count on complete clarity, because ambiguous documentation in federal investigation context tends to stay ambiguous in ways that benefit the government. Naomi put her hand flat on the conference table. What's the best defense? Douglas looked at her. He had worked with Naomi once before, when she and Adrian were negotiating the property purchase for the gallery expansion, and he had developed a specific respect for the way she processed information. The best defense is documentation that predates Park's construction. Original records showing the intent and execution of the restructuring in real time, before anyone had a reason to construct a narrative around it. If we can demonstrate that the paper trail Park is working from was assembled after the fact, with selective framing, and if we can show the original unedited version of those records, we substantially undermine whatever case he's built. Adrian has all of that, Naomi said. Then I need all of it on my desk by end of business today. Adrian nodded. You'll have it. There's one more thing, Douglas said. He looked at his legal pad. He looked at the 3 words he had written at the top before they arrived. He turned the pad around so they could both see it. 3 words. Who else knows? Adrian looked at the words. He looked at Douglas. Explain. Park has documentation. Your mother initiated contact. Your aunt and your grandmother were present Monday night and were aware of the leverage being applied. Douglas folded his hands on the table. The question I need answered before I do anything else is whether the information Park holds has been shared with anyone beyond the immediate parties. Because if it has, if it's already been passed to an intermediary who would survive any action you take against Park, then the strategy changes entirely. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Cho is working on that, he said. Get me Cho's findings before noon, Douglas said. Cho doesn't usually... I know what Cho usually does, Douglas said. Tell him this is different. Adrian looked at the 3 words on the legal pad. Who else knows? He thought about the call his mother had made at the base of the East Wing staircase. He thought about the 4 minutes and 12 seconds of that call. He thought about what his mother's voice sounded like saying, whatever it takes. He thought about 31 years of his mother building and protecting the world she had decided she deserved. He thought about his daughter, who did not yet have a name, who was 12 weeks old and existed in a photograph in a white envelope that was currently sitting on the nightstand beside his and Naomi's bed, which was in an apartment that was in his name, which was connected to a financial structure that Park Jin-woo had spent 6 months constructing a story around. He picked up his phone. He called Cho. He said, whatever you're doing, it's now a Douglas Park priority. He needs your findings by noon. Then he looked at Naomi. She was looking back at him. She had her hands wrapped around a coffee cup she hadn't drunk from. Her face was very still and very awake, the particular kind of awake that came from deciding to be present in a situation you couldn't leave. We're going to be all right, he said. She looked at him for a long moment before she answered, not because she doubted it, not entirely, but because she was the kind of person who did not receive reassurance without examining it first. I know, she said. But when she said it, her hand went briefly to her coat pocket, the automatic gesture, the one she'd made since the night on the terrace, pressing lightly over the place where the white envelope had been. Checking, the way you check something Cho's findings came in at 11:47. 13 minutes before Douglas's deadline, which was either professional precision or the universe deciding that Adrian had been given enough time to sit in a conference room anticipating bad news and needed to move on to actually receiving it. The email was encrypted, 4 attachments, a single line of text in the body. It's been shared. Call me. Adrian called him from the hallway outside Douglas's conference room, while Naomi sat inside reviewing the restructuring documents they'd spent the morning pulling together. He stood with his back against the wall, and his phone pressed to his ear, and listened to Cho's voice come through flat and careful, the voice Cho used when he was managing his own reaction to information. Park passed the documentation package to 2 separate parties 6 days ago, Cho said. Before Monday night, before the terrace. He wasn't waiting to see what happened. He had already deployed. Who? First party is a federal contact, not an official filing, a relationship, someone Park has used before to apply pressure informally. The kind of contact where documents get placed in a particular person's awareness without officially entering any system. And the second, a pause. A journalist, investigative. She covers organized crime-adjacent business structures for a publication that has run 3 major exposés in the last 2 years, 2 of which resulted in federal investigations. Adrian closed his eyes, opened them. The hallway was empty and very quiet. Industrial carpet and fluorescent light, and the particular silence of a building full of people who were busy with their own crises. The journalist has it, he said. She has it. We don't know if she's started working it yet. The handoff was 6 days ago. These things usually take how long? For a reporter of her caliber, to assess a document package of this complexity, Cho stopped. She could publish in 2 weeks. She could publish in 2 months. She could decide it's not ready and sit on it. We don't know where she is in the process. Can we find out? I'm working on that. Work faster. Adrian pressed his free hand flat against the wall, felt the cool of it. The federal contact, is there a filing risk? Not immediate, but if the journalist publishes first and the story gets traction, the contact becomes obligated to act. It goes from informal awareness to a paper trail that requires response. So the order mattered. If the journalist moved first, the federal contact moved. If the federal contact moved first, he had a window. The timeline was dependent on a woman he didn't know, sitting somewhere in this city with a folder full of selectively arranged facts about his life, deciding when she had enough. Find out where she is, Adrian said, as specifically as you can without making contact. And then? Then I'll decide. He went back into the conference room. Douglas looked at him. Naomi looked at him. He sat down and told them both what Cho had said, and the room got the specific quality of quiet that came when people were rearranging their understanding of a situation's severity. Douglas picked up his pen, set it down, picked it up again. The journalist changes the calculus significantly. I'm aware, Adrian said, because if she publishes before we can establish the counter-narrative through proper channels, the framing is set. Corrections and clarifications after a major investigative piece have about 1/10 the impact of the original story. I know how news cycles work, Douglas. Then you know that what we need is a controlled disclosure that gets our version into the record before her version exists. Douglas looked at him. Which means we need to move today, not tomorrow. Today. What kind of controlled disclosure? Naomi said. Douglas turned to her. Adrian's restructuring was done legitimately. We have the documentation. We have the original intent, the execution timeline, the compliance records. If we present that package proactively to the appropriate federal office, not in response to an inquiry, but as a voluntary disclosure with full supporting documentation, we establish the legitimate record first. It becomes the foundation. Anything Park's journalist publishes afterward is responding to an already existing official record. That sounds straightforward, Naomi said. It isn't, Douglas said, because voluntary disclosure means Adrian is walking into a federal office and initiating a conversation. Even with everything clean, even with full documentation, that conversation has risks. Things get asked, things get followed, and once you initiate, you're in it. Better in it on our terms than in it on Park's terms, Naomi said. Yes, Douglas said. That's the argument. They both looked at Adrian. He was looking at the table, at the stack of documents they'd spent the morning pulling together. Every original record, every filing date, every sign-off that showed the restructuring was what he said it was. Years of trying to do something right, now sitting in a conference room as evidence in a fight he hadn't chosen. He thought about his daughter, not abstractly, concretely. The specific weight of a thing that was 12 weeks old and didn't know anything about Park Jin-woo or federal disclosures or the particular way that a family could become its own worst weapon. Set the meeting, he said to Douglas. Douglas was already reaching for his phone. They walked out of the building at 1:15 in the afternoon into cold October sunlight that felt wrong for the mood. Naomi put her sunglasses on. Adrian didn't have sunglasses and squinted against the light in a way that made him look for a moment just tired, not powerful, not controlled. Just tired in the October sun outside a building where he'd just agreed to walk voluntarily into federal territory. Naomi took his hand. She didn't say anything. He didn't either. They walked half a block to where his car was waiting, and the driver opened the door and they got in. Douglas is good, she said when the door closed. He's very good. And the documentation supports you. It does. Then we're going to be okay. She said it the way she said things she meant and was also afraid of, directly, without flinching, holding the fear inside the statement instead of beside it. He turned to look at her. She was looking straight ahead, sunglasses still on, hands in her lap. Her jaw was set. She was doing the thing she did when she had decided the outcome and was working backward from it, inhabiting the future she'd chosen with enough conviction that the present had to catch up. He loved her for it. He also knew what it was costing her. "When did you last eat something?" he said. She blinked, turned to him. "I had coffee." "That's not food." "I know what food is, Adrian." "We're stopping somewhere before the afternoon," he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then something in her face released, just slightly, a small unwinding of the thing she'd been holding in her shoulders since 6:15 that morning. "There's a soup place on West 48th. Then we're going to the soup place." They went to the soup place. It was small and warm and had no televisions, and no one in it who knew who they were. Naomi ordered the tomato bisque and ate all of it, and then ate half of his cornbread when he offered it, and he watched her eat with the particular quality of attention he'd had since Monday night, noticing what she needed before she asked, compensating for the last 2 years of not noticing enough. "Stop watching me eat," she said. "I'm not—" "You are." She pointed her spoon at him. "I'm fine. The baby is fine. Eat your soup." He ate his soup. His phone went at 2:30. Douglas. The meeting was set for 4 o'clock, Federal Building on Broadway, a contact Douglas had used twice before in situations that required discretion and speed. Adrian had 2.5 hours to prepare, and Douglas wanted him in the office at 3 to go through the presentation. Naomi went with him. At 3 o'clock, they were back in the conference room, Douglas talking Adrian through the sequence. What he would say, in what order, what he would produce, how to answer the questions that would inevitably come about the period before the restructuring, the part that wasn't clean, the part that was real, that Adrian had never tried to pretend wasn't real, that he had built the restructuring specifically to get his name and his family's future away from. "They'll ask about the period between 2019 and 2021, Douglas said. "I know. I need you to be straightforward about that period without being comprehensive. There's a difference." "I know the difference." "Adrian." Douglas looked at him across the table. "I need you to hear me say this directly, as your attorney, with your wife present. This meeting goes well if you are completely honest about what the legitimate record shows and carefully precise about what it doesn't address. It goes badly if you try to manage the room. These people are very good at reading management. I'm not going to manage the room. You manage every room you walk into. It's automatic. You need to turn it off for 4 o'clock. Naomi made a small sound that was not quite a laugh. Adrian looked at her. "He's right," she said simply. "I know he's right. Just go in there as a person, not as whoever you have to be in other situations." She looked at him steadily. "You're a man who built something legitimate and is trying to protect it. That's true. Let it be visible." He looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded. At 3:58, they walked into the Federal Building. The meeting lasted 2 hours and 17 minutes. Adrian did not manage the room. He sat across from 2 federal agents and a supervising attorney, and he answered questions in the order they were asked and produced documents in the sequence Douglas had prepared, and he let himself be, as Naomi had said, visible. A man who had come from something and tried to move away from it and was sitting in a federal building at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday because someone had tried to use his past to destroy his present, and he was not going to let that happen by refusing to show up. They asked about 2019 to 2021. He answered carefully and honestly, and let Douglas add the legal framing where it was needed. They asked about the subsidiary with the 2-year tail. He explained it. He showed them the original intent documentation, dated, signed, submitted. The version that existed before Park's forensic accountant had assembled their selective reading. They asked about his current business activities. He told them. At 6:15, the supervising attorney gathered her papers and said, "We'll need a week to review the documentation package. We'll be in contact." She looked at him. "Thank you for coming in." It was not a resolution. It was not a clearance. It was the beginning of a process that would take time and attention and would be expensive and would require Douglas's involvement for months. But it was their version, in the record first, before Park's journalist had moved. It was the position. They walked out of the federal building at 6:22 into the evening, the city darker now, street lights already on, the October air colder than it had been at noon. Naomi stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the sky for a moment. Just that, just standing and looking up, like she needed to locate herself in something larger than the day they'd just had. Adrian stood beside her and did not say anything. "Okay," she said after a moment. "Okay," he said. She lowered her eyes from the sky. She looked at him. "Now what?" "Now park," he said. She looked at him carefully. "Define what that means." "It means that the documentation problem is in process. The federal exposure is managed as well as it can be, which leaves the source." He met her eyes. "Park didn't do this for your mother. He did this for himself. My mother is a secondary player. I've been thinking about Park as an obstacle between me and fixing things with my family, and that's wrong. Park is the problem. My mother is the mechanism he used." "So you separate them," she said. "I separate them." "How?" He looked at the street. A cab splashed through a puddle. A man on a bicycle wove between two parked delivery trucks. The city running itself, indifferent and constant. "My mother doesn't know what Park actually wants. She thinks she hired a weapon. She doesn't know the weapon has its own trajectory." "So you tell her." "I show her," he said. "There's a difference." Naomi was quiet for a moment. "This is going to require a conversation with your mother." "Yes." "Tonight?" "Tomorrow morning." He reached out and put his hand briefly against the side of her face, his palm against her cheek, the way he touched her when he meant it without ceremony. "Tonight you need to sleep." She leaned into his hand for a moment, just a moment. Then she straightened. "Tomorrow morning," she agreed. They went home. Naomi was asleep by 9:30, which told him how much the last 3 days had taken from her, even as she'd refused to show it. He sat at the edge of the bed for a few minutes, watching her breathe, doing the thing that was becoming a habit, checking the envelope on the nightstand, knowing it was there, the photograph inside it unchanged. Then he went to his office. He called Cho at 10. "I need to set a meeting with Park," he said. Cho was quiet for a long second. "Adrian, not a confrontation, a conversation. Tomorrow morning, neutral location, his choice. I need him to know I'm not coming at him, and I need him to be curious enough to show up. If Park thinks you want to negotiate, I don't want to negotiate. I want to have a specific conversation about what he actually wants, and whether he's thought clearly about the conditions under which he can get it." He paused. "Because he hasn't. He made an alliance with my mother based on short-term tactical value, and he hasn't thought through what happens when that alliance has no more value to him." A pause. "You want him to see a path that doesn't involve your mother. I want him to see that the path he's currently on ends somewhere he doesn't want to be." Adrian leaned back in his chair. "Park is smart. He's always been smart. He built something substantial from nothing, and he's maintained it for 20 years. He made one mistake, which is that he picked a partner who is motivated by something personal while he's motivated by something structural. Those two things don't stay aligned, and you want him to realize that before he commits further. I want him to look at his current position and understand what it costs him if he continues." He looked at his desk, at the files, at the particular architecture of what needed to happen in what order. "Can you set the meeting?" "I can reach out." Cho paused. "He might not come." "He'll come," Adrian said. "He's been trying to get me in a room for 4 years. He'll come." Cho set the meeting for 9 in the morning. Park chose a restaurant in Koreatown, private room in the back, the kind of place where the owner knew to keep staff away and was experienced in not noticing which specific men came through the side entrance. Adrian had been in that room twice before in his life, both times with his grandfather, and it had the particular atmosphere of a place that had held a lot of conversations that never left the building. He arrived at 8:58. Park was already there. Park Jin-woo was 61 years old and built like someone who had once been substantially larger and had compressed over time into something denser and more contained. He had the measured stillness of a man who had survived enough situations to understand that stillness was its own kind of power. He looked at Adrian the way you look at someone you've been thinking about for a long time and are now encountering in 3 dimensions. He poured tea. He poured 2 cups. He pushed one toward Adrian's side of the table without asking. Adrian sat down. He did not touch the tea immediately. You look like your grandfather, Park said, in Korean. He said it without sentiment, an observation, not a compliment. I hear that often, Adrian said, in English. Park switched to English without comment. You asked for this meeting. I did. You have the look of someone who wants to make an offer. I have the look of someone who wants to have a clear conversation first, Adrian said. Offers come after clarity. Park turned his teacup with 2 fingers, a slow rotation. I was watching Adrian with the specific attention of a man who was doing several calculations simultaneously and was not going to reveal any of them prematurely. All right, clarity. You've been building a case against my business structure for 6 months, Adrian said. You passed the documentation to a federal contact and a journalist 6 days ago. You did this because my mother called you 8 months ago and offered you access, proximity to the Kwan name, through whatever remained of the original structure, in exchange for pressure on my marriage. Park didn't confirm, didn't deny. His teacup made another slow rotation. What I want to be clear about, Adrian continued, is that the documentation you've built is no longer the advantage you think it is. I met with federal representatives yesterday afternoon with full voluntary disclosure and the original, unedited record of my restructuring. You had a window. The window is closed. Something moved in Park's face. Very slightly. Not quite surprise. Park was too experienced for surprise to show fully, but an adjustment, a recalculation. You moved fast, he said. I did. Your attorney is Douglas Park. He is. He's very good. Park set his teacup down. He looked at Adrian directly for the first time in the conversation. So the documentation is neutralized, you think? I think it's substantially less useful than it was 48 hours ago, Adrian said. And I think you know that. You're not a man who invests 6 months in preparation and doesn't account for the possibility that the target moves. You're right that I account for it. Park's voice was steady. The journalist is still working. The journalist has a document package that now exists in a context established by a voluntary federal disclosure. Adrian held Park's gaze. She's a professional. She'll know what that means for her story. It complicates it, Park said. It doesn't eliminate it. No, Adrian agreed. It doesn't eliminate it, which means we're both still exposed to some degree, and neither of us fully controls the timeline. He paused. Which is why I'm here. Park was quiet for a moment. He poured himself more tea, a deliberate, unhurried gesture. You said offers come after clarity. Yes. So we've had clarity. He set the pot down. What's the offer? Adrian looked at him. He thought about what Cho had said. He wants to be adjacent, connected enough to matter again. He thought about what his mother didn't understand about why Park had agreed to her call in the first place. He thought about the difference between what his mother thought she was getting from this arrangement and what Park had actually been angling for. You don't want my marriage to end, Adrian said. That was my mother's goal. You used her goal to build a position. Park's expression didn't change. What you want, Adrian said, is relevance. Specifically, you want connection to the legitimate side, the side that has my name on it and doesn't have the exposure that your current operations carry. You've been watching me build the security and logistics company for 2 years, and you've been watching it become something with real institutional clients and a real future, and you want, not ownership, not control. You want proximity. A line that connects you to something clean enough that when you eventually need to restructure your own situation, you have somewhere to point. The restaurant was very quiet. From somewhere beyond the closed door, the distant sounds of a kitchen starting its morning preparation. Nothing else. Park looked at his tea. You've been thinking about this. I've had 3 days of not sleeping, Adrian said. I had time. And you think you can offer me that? Park looked up. Proximity to your legitimate operation. I think I can offer you a consulting relationship with one of the security company's non-sensitive divisions, Adrian said. Your name appears on nothing. Your financial benefit is structured through a legitimate vehicle. You bring specific knowledge of certain regional logistics that my company currently pays third parties to manage. It's a real arrangement that provides real value. He held Park's eyes. And it gives you the line you're actually looking for. Park was very still. In exchange, Adrian said, the journalist's source material goes cold. The federal contact's informal awareness is allowed to remain informal. And you end your arrangement with my mother. End my arrangement, Park said carefully. Whatever she thinks you're still going to do for her, you're done. You tell her the arrangement has changed. You don't explain how. You just stop. Adrian leaned forward slightly. Because what my mother wants from you is something that benefits her and costs you everything I just described. She wants my marriage ended. If you help her end it, I have no reason to structure anything for you. If my marriage ends, the man sitting across from you today does not exist in any professional context that's useful to you. Park looked at him for a long time. You're asking me to choose, Park said. I'm showing you what each choice costs, Adrian said. You can choose whatever you want. Outside, somewhere on 32nd Street, a car horn sounded. A brief, impatient single note. Then nothing. Park turned his teacup one final time. He set it down precisely in the center of its saucer. Your mother won't accept this, he said. My mother isn't at this table, Adrian said. When she finds out That's her problem to manage, Adrian said. Not yours. Park looked at him. Something was working behind his eyes. Not the recalculation of moments before. Something slower and more fundamental. The specific look of a man who has spent decades operating from a position of enforced patience and is now being offered something he has genuinely been waiting for, and is suspicious of it because he's been waiting long enough to know that things you wait for often cost more than they appear to. Why would you do this, Park said. Why would you bring me in at all? After everything this situation? Because you're going to be a problem regardless, Adrian said. You've been a problem in the background for 4 years. I'd rather have you where I can see you, doing something that has value, than somewhere I can't see you, building the next version of this. He met Park's eyes. And because I need this to be over. I have a child coming. I need this done. Park's expression shifted. The smallest degree, the kind of shift that was almost nothing. But Adrian had been reading men like Park for 20 years, and he saw it. The specific quality of a man who has just been spoken to honestly and is deciding what to do with that. I'll need to review any arrangement through my own attorney, Park said. Of course. The journalist, he paused. Withdrawing source material at this stage requires care. I trust you to manage it appropriately, Adrian said. You've been managing these situations for 30 years. Park looked at him once more. Then he picked up his tea and drank from it for the first time since Adrian had sat down. I'll be in contact through Cho, he said. That works. Adrian stood. Park did not stand. He remained seated, his hands around his teacup, looking at something in the middle distance that was probably the next several moves of whatever game he was still always playing. He was already somewhere else in his mind, already restructuring. Adrian walked to the door of the private room. He had his hand on the frame when Park's voice came from behind him. Your grandfather, Park said. He would have handled this differently. Adrian paused. He didn't turn around. I know, he said. That's not a criticism, Park said. Adrian walked out. The morning air on 32nd Street was sharp and tasted like car exhaust and the distant char of something cooking in one of the restaurants that was already open. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment and took a breath that was not quite steady. His phone showed 2 missed calls from his mother. He had not spoken to her since Monday night. He had managed everything through Douglas and Cho and Park because he had needed to neutralize the situation before he walked back into that conversation, and now the situation was not resolved. It was not resolved. Park's agreement was not confirmed, the federal process was ongoing, the journalist was still somewhere with a folder, and his mother was calling him twice before 9:30 in the morning. But the shape had changed, the position had changed. He was no longer reacting. He was no longer a man standing in a corridor listening to his life being auctioned. I was standing on a sidewalk in Koreatown with a meeting behind him, and a phone with 2 missed calls on it, and the next thing, the thing that had been waiting behind all of this since Monday night, was still in front of him. He called his driver. He stood on the sidewalk and waited. His mother called a 3rd time. He let it go to voicemail. When the car arrived, he got in and said the address. Not the office, not Douglas's building, not anywhere operational. Home. He needed 20 minutes that were not about any of this before he drove out to Long Island and had the conversation with his mother that had been building since Monday night and was now unavoidable. He needed 20 minutes with Naomi first. She was at the kitchen counter when he came in, laptop open, gallery business, an email she was reading with her glasses on and a half-eaten piece of toast on a plate beside her. She looked up when he came through the door. She read his face. How'd it go, she said. Better than I expected. He sat on the counter stool across from her. Park is going to stand down. She looked at him carefully. What did you offer him? He told her. She listened. She didn't interrupt. When he finished, she looked at her laptop screen for a moment, not reading it, just looking at something while she processed. And then she looked back at him. You brought him inside to neutralize him, she said. Yes. That's... She paused. That's a very Adrian solution. Is that good or bad? It's practical. She set her glasses on top of her laptop. And it's probably right. She stopped again. I need you to watch that relationship, Chip. Whatever you've built with him, I need you to watch it. I intend to. I mean really watch it, she said, not Cho watching it. You. Understood. She looked at him for another moment. Then she picked up her toast and took a bite, which was her version of moving forward. Your mother called me this morning, she said. He went still. What? 3 times. I didn't answer. She set the toast down. But she also called the gallery line, which means she went looking for a number she didn't already have. The kitchen was quiet. She's escalating, Naomi said. Not with drama, just observing it, the way she observed things that required clear acknowledgement before they could be addressed. Whatever Park told her, or didn't tell her, or whatever she sensed was coming, she's not going to wait. I know, he said. I'm going to her today. Naomi looked at him. I'm coming. Naomi. Adrian. Her voice was even. I have been handled and managed and protected from conversations about my own life for 2 years. I am 12 weeks pregnant, and my mother-in-law called my place of business this morning, and I'm not going to sit in this apartment while you drive to Long Island and have the conversation that should have happened Monday night. She met his eyes. I'm coming. That is not negotiable. He looked at her for a long moment. That is not negotiable, she said again, quietly. Completely. He picked up his phone and told the driver to keep the car. They drove to Long Island in the kind of silence that was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of 2 people who had said everything that needed saying and were now holding what came next in the space between them without needing to fill it with words. Naomi had her hand on the door rest. Her other hand was in her lap. He could see the slight movement of her jaw as she worked through something internally. What do you need from this conversation? He asked, halfway through the drive. She thought about it. I need her to hear me, she said. Not respond to me, not manage me, hear me. That may not be possible, he said, with my mother. I know. She looked out the window. But I need to say it anyway. The estate gates opened when the car approached. Same gravel, same pale house, same golden windows. In daylight it looked different, less theatrical, more just large, the kind of house that was impressive and impersonal at the same time. A place that had been decorated for status rather than comfort. The car stopped. Adrian came around to her side. She stepped out and stood in the gravel looking at the front door. And for a moment he saw her the way you see someone when you suddenly look past the competence and steadiness at what's underneath it. The thing she'd been carrying for 2 years, the thing that Monday night had finally put a name to. She was 34 years old, and she had built her career from nothing, and she had fallen in love with a complicated man and married him honestly, and she had been made to feel like a problem to be solved in the house of the family. She had married into, and she had said nothing for 2 years because she had loved him enough to protect him from it. He took her hand. She looked at him. I've got you, he said. She held his gaze for a moment, then she squared her shoulders and looked at the front door. Let's go, she said. The door opened before they reached it. Not automatically this time. Evelyn was standing in the doorway. She had clearly been watching from inside. She was wearing day clothes, something structured and neutral, but there was something different about her this morning that Adrian clocked immediately. She looked smaller. Not physically. Evelyn Kwan was the same height she had always been, but there was something in her posture, a degree of compression, that told him Park had already made contact. Her eyes went to Naomi first, then to Adrian. She did not smile. Come in, she said. They came in. The house was quiet in a way that suggested it was not naturally quiet. The absence of staff in the entry hall, no Aunt Vivian in the peripheral rooms, no sound of Helena's television from the east sitting room. A curated quiet. A prepared quiet. Evelyn had cleared the stage. She led them to the front sitting room. Not the dining room, not the terrace. The sitting room, which was smaller and had the quality of a room used for conversations that were meant to feel contained. 3 chairs arranged in a triangle. She had thought about this. They sat. Evelyn looked at her hands for a moment. Then she looked at Adrian. "Park called me this morning," she said. "I know," Adrian said. "He told me the arrangement has changed." Her voice was controlled. Every word placed with deliberate care, the way you place things when you're afraid of what happens if you lose control of the arrangement. "He said you met this morning." "We did." She looked at her hands again, then at Naomi. The look lasted a moment longer than it had ever lasted before. Not warmth, not welcome, but something different from what had been there before. Something that might have been, if you were generous, the beginning of a reckoning. "I owe you an explanation," Evelyn said. Naomi looked at her. She didn't say yes you do, and she didn't say you don't have to, and she didn't fill the space. She just looked at Evelyn and waited. And the waiting was its own kind of answer because it said, "I'm here, I'm listening, and what you say next is going to matter." Evelyn drew a breath that was not entirely steady. She opened her mouth. And that was the moment Adrian's phone went off. He glanced at it, a reflex, the automatic glance of a man whose phone had been a lifeline for the last 72 hours. The screen showed Cho's name. He declined it. Cho called again immediately. Adrian looked at Naomi. She gave him a barely perceptible nod. "Take it." He stepped into the hallway. "What?" he said. "The journalist," Cho said. "She's published." The hallway was very still. A clock somewhere in the house made its small mechanical sound. "When?" Adrian said. 20 minutes ago. Online. It's already being picked up." A pause. "Adrian. She had something we didn't know Park gave her, something beyond the documentation package." His hand tightened on the phone. "What?" "A source," Cho said. "An inside source. Someone who gave her not just documents, but testimony. Someone who was present for conversations that—" He stopped. "Someone who knew things about your restructuring that Park shouldn't have had access to, that no one outside this family should have had access to." Adrian stood in the hallway of his mother's house. He looked at the sitting room door. Beyond it, his mother was sitting across from his wife, about to offer an explanation that he now needed to hear in a completely different way than he had needed to hear it 30 seconds ago. "Who?" he said. Cho said a name. The clock made its small sound again. Adrian lowered his phone and looked at the sitting room door and understood, with the specific cold clarity of something that had been true for a long time and had just the name Cho said, was Vivian. Adrian stood in the hall and let that land the way you let something land when there's no choice but to receive it fully. No flinching, no deflecting, just the weight of it settling into the body and staying there. Vivian. Not his mother. Not Park's external network. Not some operational leak from the old structure. Vivian, who had been at every family dinner, who had poured wine and made pointed observations about Naomi's dress and suggested there would eventually be another woman after her. Vivian, who had been present for conversations inside this house that predated any of Park's arrangements by years. Vivian, who had access to the specific kind of domestic knowledge that no forensic accountant could have assembled from documents alone. The kind of knowledge that came from being inside a family for 30 years and paying attention to everything while appearing to merely comment on things. The source the journalist had wasn't financial documentation. It was testimony. Personal, specific, interior testimony from a woman who had sat at dinners and walked through offices and overheard phone calls and accumulated, over years, the raw material of a family's private truth. Adrian put his phone in his pocket. He stood in the hallway for a moment with his hand flat against the wall, looking at the sitting room door. Beyond it, his mother, his wife, a conversation that had been set up as one thing and was now something else entirely. He pushed the door open. Evelyn and Naomi both looked up. Naomi read his face immediately. He watched her do it, watched the precise moment she understood that something had changed, her spine straightening very slightly, the way it did when she was preparing for information. Evelyn read something in his face too, but what she read was different. What she read made her go pale in the specific way of someone who has been dreading a particular knock on a particular door and has just heard it. "Where's Vivian?" Adrian said. Evelyn's mouth opened, closed. "Mom." His voice was quiet, that specific quiet. Where is she? She went. She had an appointment this morning. The journalist published 20 minutes ago, Adrian said. He watched his mother's face. He watched the color leave it by degrees, the architecture of her composure doing the thing it did under pressure, not collapsing, reorganizing, searching for the next position. Vivian was her inside source, not documents, testimony, things she knew from being in this family for 30 years. The sitting room was absolutely still. Naomi was looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her before. Not quite shock, because Naomi processed too fast for clean shock, but the specific expression of someone hearing a piece of information that reframes everything that preceded it. The 2 years, the carefully calibrated cruelty, the way Vivian had always known exactly where to put the knife. Evelyn stood up. The movement was abrupt, the first uncontrolled physical thing Adrian had seen her do in years. She walked to the window and stood with her back to the room, looking out at the October garden. "Did you know?" Adrian said. She didn't answer. "Mom." He didn't move toward her. He stayed where he was. "Did you know Vivian was talking to a journalist?" "No." The word came out compressed, like something she'd been holding at pressure. "No, I didn't know that." "But you knew she was involved with Park." A longer silence. Her shoulders moved. "I brought Park in," she said. "I made the call." Vivian, she knew I had made the call. She knew what I was trying to do. She turned from the window. Her face had a quality he had almost never seen on it, stripped of the social layer, down to something older and more raw. "I didn't know she had gone further, on her own." "Why would she?" Naomi said. Both Evelyn and Adrian looked at her. She was sitting in her chair with her hands folded in her lap, her voice very even, her eyes on Evelyn with a steadiness that was neither confrontational nor forgiving, simply direct. A woman asking a real question. "Why would Vivian go further than you?" Naomi said. "What does she get from this that you don't?" Evelyn looked at Naomi for a moment. Something moved across her face that was complicated and human and considerably more honest than anything Adrian had seen from her in recent memory. She sat back down. She did not look at the window again. "Vivian has never had what I have," Evelyn said. Her voice was different now, quieter, with the slightly rough texture of someone speaking without the usual preparation. "She married poorly. She recovered financially through this family's support, through Adrian's support. But she has spent 30 years watching me manage a life that she stopped. She wanted this family to look a certain way. She has always wanted that. And she saw in Naomi she saw an opportunity to shape something that she has wanted to change since Adrian was married. She wanted him to marry someone else," Naomi said. "She had someone specific in mind," Evelyn said. "Has had for years. A family she'd been cultivating a relationship with. She thought if this marriage ended..." She stopped again. The word that followed was very quiet. She thought she'd finally have the influence she's been reaching for. Adrian looked at his mother. He looked at the specific geography of her face in this moment. The pride that was still there, diminished but structural. The thing that had built and protected and also damaged without meaning to damage. He thought about 31 years of watching this woman manage every room she walked into with the certainty that management was love. "You didn't do this for the family," he said. "Not entirely." Evelyn met his eyes. "You did it because you were afraid," he said. "Not of Naomi, of losing me, of the version of me that exists when she's in the room, the version that doesn't need you to manage anything." He held her gaze. "That's what you couldn't stand." The clock in the hallway made its sound. Evelyn did not confirm it. She did not deny it. She looked at her son with an expression that was the closest thing to nakedness he had ever seen on her face and said nothing, and the nothing was its own answer. Adrian looked at Naomi. She was already looking at him. Her expression said, "I know. I've known for a while. Not with cruelty. With the tired accuracy of someone who has been living inside a truth that others are only now finding their way to." He sat down, the chair between them. The triangle his mother had arranged, which was now being used for something entirely different than she had prepared for. "Here's what happens now," he said. He looked at both of them, his mother, his wife, the two women who had been in a war for 2 years that he had not seen, that had been conducted around him while he was occupied being the thing both of them needed him to be. "The article is published. We can't unpublish it. Douglas is already managing the response. We have the voluntary disclosure on record. We have the original documentation. The federal office will confirm the timeline of our proactive contact. The article becomes, in the news cycle, a story about a man who preemptively disclosed rather than a story about a man who hid something. That's not comfortable, but it's survivable. He looked at his mother. Park is stepping back, he said. You won't have his support going forward because his interests have redirected. That leaves Vivian, who acted unilaterally and will need to answer for that. Not to me. To you. Evelyn absorbed that, the implication of it. You're giving me Vivian. I'm not giving you anything, he said. I'm telling you that the consequences of what Vivian did are inside your family as much as mine. How you handle your sister is your decision. I'm not involved in it. Naomi shifted in her chair. He looked at her. I have something to say, she said. Both Adrian and Evelyn looked at her. Naomi looked at Evelyn directly. Not with the pleasant face, not with the managed expression she had worn for 2 years at this family's tables. With her actual face, which was tired and clear-eyed and held something that was neither victory nor defeat. I know you don't respect me, she said. I've known it since the first dinner after the wedding. I know you think I'm not enough. Not the right background, not the right culture, not the right anything. And I spent 2 years pretending I didn't know that because I loved your son and I didn't want to put him in the middle. She paused. I'm not going to pretend anymore, not because I'm angry, because it doesn't help anyone. Evelyn looking at her with an expression that was difficult to name. I'm not asking you to love me, Naomi continued. I'm not asking you to approve of me. I'm asking you to look at me and understand one thing clearly. Her voice stayed even. It was one of the most controlled things Adrian had ever witnessed. His wife, in the house where she had been humiliated for 2 years, keeping her voice level because she had decided what she wanted to say, and she was going to say it without giving anyone the satisfaction of watching her fall apart. Your grandchild is going to be born in the spring. That child is going to grow up in a world that will already tell her complicated things about who she is and where she belongs. She doesn't need her grandmother to be one more voice doing that. She held Evelyn's gaze. That's it. That's the whole ask. The room was very quiet. Evelyn looked at Naomi for a long time, long enough that Adrian found himself counting seconds the way he'd counted in the corridor on Monday night, measuring time in the absence of words. Her face did something difficult and private and genuine, the sequence of a person moving through something they had built too many walls around and were now being asked to inhabit without the walls. I know what I did, Evelyn said finally. Her voice had lost its processed quality entirely. It sounded like an older woman, which she was. I know what I allowed to happen in this house. I'm not asking for an apology, Naomi said. I'm asking for a change. Those are not always different things. They are when the apology is easier than the change. Evelyn looked at her for another moment. Then something in her posture shifted, a small thing, barely visible, the degree of shift that came from a decision made inside a body before the mind had fully caught up to it. She looked at Adrian. I'll speak to Vivian, she said. That's between you and her, he said. And Helena, Evelyn said. He met his mother's eyes. What about Helena? She knew about Park, Evelyn said. Not the extent of it, but she knew I had made contact. She approved. She said the word with a difficulty that suggested it was costing her something to say it. Mother has always believed that the family structures she built required protecting, at any cost. I'll handle Helena, Adrian said. His mother looked at him. She won't receive it well. She never does. He stood. He offered his hand to Naomi, and she took it and stood beside him. He looked at his mother, at her face, stripped and real in the October light coming through the window, older than it looked when she was managing things. I'm not ending contact with you, Mom. I want to be clear about that. But things are different now. The accounts, the access, the arrangements. Those are going to look different going forward. And when this baby is born, how you treat my family is going to determine how much of your grandchild's life you're part of. Evelyn looked at him, at Naomi, at the two of them standing together in the room she had arranged for a different purpose. Okay, she said. It was a very small word. It had a very large amount of weight inside it. He squeezed Naomi's hand once. She squeezed back. They walked out of the sitting room, through the entry hall, out through the front door into the cold October morning. The gravel was damp. The sky was the pale, flat white of a day that had started too early and carried too much. Naomi stopped beside the car and leaned against it for a moment. She put her face up toward the sky, eyes closed, just the cold air on her face. He stood beside her and waited. That was harder than the terrace, she said, without opening her eyes. I know. The terrace was just money. She opened her eyes. The sky was still pale and still flat. That was... She's afraid of losing you. She's been afraid of it since before I existed. She looked at him. That's a harder thing to fight than money. You weren't fighting her, he said. No, she agreed. But she was fighting me. And it's hard to watch someone fight you out of fear and not... She stopped, pressed her lips together. I don't hate her. That's the thing. I've tried sometimes when it was very bad. I couldn't get there. He looked at her. She loves you, Naomi said. Badly, with a lot of collateral damage. But she does. She pushed off the car. That's something you can work with. That's not nothing. He looked at her for a moment. This woman, who had spent 2 years absorbing his family's worst behavior and come out of the other side of it without the hardness that would have been understandable, that most people would have earned the right to. How are you not angrier? He said. She thought about it. I'm angry, she said. I just know what to do with it. She opened the car door. Can we stop somewhere on the way back? I need to eat something that isn't crisis food. He almost laughed. It came out as something close to it. Yeah, he said. We can stop. They drove back to Manhattan slowly and stopped at a diner somewhere on the LIE that had booths and bad lighting and very good eggs, and ate a meal that had nothing to do with anything that mattered except that they were hungry and they needed to sit somewhere ordinary for 20 minutes and be people who were eating breakfast. The journalist's article ran for 3 days across several outlets before the news cycle moved. Douglas released a statement on Adrian's behalf that cited the voluntary federal disclosure and presented the restructuring timeline cleanly. 2 follow-up pieces mentioned the disclosure prominently. The federal office confirmed, off the record, that the disclosure had been received and was under standard review. The story became, as Douglas had projected, a complicated one rather than a damning one. The kind of story that makes business partners cautious rather than hostile, the kind that survives. Park Jin-woo did not make further contact about the journalist. The source material, in the absence of Park's active support, went cold the way unsupported stories go cold. Not with a dramatic withdrawal, but with a silence that said the story would not be further developed. Vivian left the country in November. Not dramatically. She told the family she needed time, that she was visiting a friend in Vancouver, that she would be in touch. Evelyn accepted this explanation with the specific quality of acceptance that meant she understood what it actually was. She did not ask Vivian to explain herself before she left. She did not need to. The conversation between them had happened in the sitting room of the Long Island house the afternoon of the day Adrian and Naomi visited, and none of the details of that conversation were shared with anyone. Evelyn came out of the room looking like a woman who had put something down that she'd been carrying a very long time, and Vivian left for Vancouver 2 days later. She did not come back. Helena was a different conversation. Helena did not receive things in sitting rooms. She received things on her own terms, in the east sitting room where her television was, surrounded by the specific arrangement of objects that had been hers for decades. Photographs, a small jade piece her husband had brought from Korea in 1971, a reading lamp that no one had ever suggested replacing. Adrian went to see her alone on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after the terrace, and sat across from her in the chair that had always been the visitor's chair and looked at his grandmother and tried to find the version of this conversation that was both true and survivable. Helena spoke first. You handled it, she said. Not a question. Yes. Park. Yes. She turned the jade piece with 2 fingers, a slow rotation, the same gesture she had made with objects for as long as he could remember, something to occupy the hands while the mind worked. I underestimated her, she said. Adrian looked at her. Who? Your wife. Helena did not look up from the jade. I assessed her as someone who had achieved something beyond her position by marrying you. I treated that as the primary fact about her. She paused. The primary fact about her is that she refused $12 million and did not tell you about the cruelty in this house because she didn't want to make you choose. The jade piece turned. I misjudged the nature of her. He was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. That is not an apology, Helena said. I know. I don't make apologies for judgments. I make corrections. She looked up then, those still dark eyes unchanged in all the years he had looked into them, the eyes that had always seen more than they revealed. My correction is this. She is your wife. The child is your child. Those are the facts as I understand them now. She set the jade piece down with precision. I will not undermine either of those facts again. It was the closest thing to a concession that Helena Kwan had probably offered in 40 years. He knew that. He also knew it was not warmth, and it was not love, and it was not the grandmother that Naomi and his daughter deserved. It was a boundary acknowledged, a correction made. In Helena's world, that was substantial. Thank you, he said. He meant it. She picked up the jade piece again. She'll need to be patient with me, Helena said. I am old, and I have been certain about things for a long time. Certainty is a difficult habit to break. I'll tell her, he said. Tell her also. Helena stopped. The pause was the longest he'd seen from her. Tell her that the woman at that table, the woman who refused the money and didn't break, that is someone I can respect, even if I don't always know how to show that. She turned the jade piece one final time. Respect is what I have to offer. It isn't nothing. No, he said. It isn't nothing. He drove home with the windows down, which was strange for November, but he needed the cold air and the noise of the world running itself outside the car. He had started and ended more conversations in the last 3 weeks than he had in the 3 years before it. He had spoken plainly to a federal office. He had restructured a relationship with a man he'd been trying to avoid for 4 years. He had watched his mother arrive at something genuine, and his aunt disappear to Vancouver, and his grandmother make the smallest possible concession in the largest possible way. He had not slept properly in 22 days. He parked in the garage and sat in the car for a moment before going up. Just sat. The engine ticking as it cooled. The concrete smell of the garage. The particular quality of a man who has been running at high speed for 3 weeks and is becoming aware, incrementally, that he is not built to sustain it indefinitely. He went upstairs. Naomi was in the second bedroom, which they had started calling the room without discussing the name change consciously. She had a paint swatch in her hand, 3 shades of the same warm yellow-green, the kind of color that couldn't decide if it was optimistic or calming, and ended up being both. She was holding it against the wall and squinting at it in the afternoon light. Too green? She said without turning around. I don't know what I'm looking at, he said. The bottom one. He looked at it. I still don't know what I'm looking at. It looks like the inside of an avocado. Is that bad for a baby room? She finally turned. She looked at his face. How was Helena? Helena made a correction, he said. Naomi processed that. That's good? For Helena, it's significant. He crossed the room and took the paint swatch from her hand and looked at it. She said she'll need you to be patient with her. I can do patient, Naomi said. I've had practice. He looked at the 3 shades of yellow-green. She said she respects you. Naomi was quiet for a moment. He looked up. Her expression was the one she got when something reached her that she hadn't fully prepared for. Not overwhelmed, just briefly open. Did she say it like that? Like that word? She said it like she meant it. Naomi turned back to the wall. She held the paint swatch up again. The bottom one, she said again after a moment. It does look like the inside of an avocado. That's what I'm going for. She lowered the swatch. Is that weird? It's a little weird, he said. I like it. She smiled. The real one, not the pleasant face, not the gallery face, not the one she had worn at his family's table for 2 years. The one that arrived when she wasn't managing anything and didn't need to. It came without warning, the way it always did, and changed her face entirely. December came. The account restructuring was completed in the first week. Evelyn's access to the primary holdings was reorganized into a formal arrangement. A fixed allowance, clearly defined, no ambiguity about what she was receiving or why. She accepted it without comment, which was its own form of communication. The property Vivian had used on East 74th transferred into a separate structure. The estate on Long Island remained in the family trust but with revised governance. Adrian's legitimate security and logistics company signed 2 new institutional contracts in December, both of which had been pending while the news cycle ran and the partners waited to see what the story settled into. When the story settled into nothing particularly catastrophic, when the voluntary disclosure held and the follow-up coverage moved on to other subjects. The contracts moved forward. The company's operational team grew by 11 people before the new year. He worked. He came home. He ate dinner with Naomi at the kitchen counter more nights than he didn't. He learned what she could and couldn't eat in the second trimester and stocked the refrigerator accordingly and received an extensive critique of his ginger tea-making technique that he considered largely valid. He slept. For the first time in years, regularly, and without the specific vigilance that had been his companion for so long he'd forgotten it was optional. On a Saturday in January, Naomi's mother came to the city. Her name was Carol. She was a tall woman with a schoolteacher's voice and Naomi's eyes, and the very particular quality of attention that people have when they have been paying close attention to their children's lives from a careful distance. She had met Adrian twice before and had been politely but thoroughly assessing him both times in a way that he respected because it was honest. She came for lunch and stayed for 6 hours, and at some point in the afternoon, while Naomi was in the bathroom and Adrian was washing dishes, Carol stood in the kitchen doorway and said, "I know what happened with your family." He turned off the water. "Naomi didn't tell me," Carol said quickly. "She didn't say much, but I know my daughter, and I know what she looks like when she's been carrying something alone. She looked like that for 2 years. She crossed her arms. "She doesn't look like that anymore." He looked at Carol and didn't have an easy answer and didn't try to construct one. "I'm not going to make a speech at you," Carol said. "I just wanted you to know that I see the difference." She looked at him directly. "Take care of her." "I intend to," he said. "Not instead of her," Carol said. "With her. There's a difference." He thought about that later, lying in the dark while Naomi slept beside him. The distinction between taking care of someone and taking care of them with the understanding that they were already capable of most of it themselves. He had spent 2 years being the thing that Naomi was organized around, and she had spent those same 2 years absorbing the cost of his inattention with such competence that he hadn't known there was a cost. The love had been real. The blind spot had also been real. Both things were true, and neither erased the other. He was going to have to live with that. He accepted it. Not neatly. There was nothing neat about it, but he accepted it the way you accept things that are genuinely yours to carry. In February, he found the photograph. Not the ultrasound. He knew where that was. He had put it in a frame in the second week of November, after the room they were calling the room got its avocado-adjacent paint and a chair and a small lamp, and the framed photograph sat on the table beside the chair, where Naomi sometimes sat in the evenings, when she couldn't sleep. He passed it every day. It was not what he found in February. What he found was the settlement page. He had asked someone, in the weeks after the terrace, to retrieve it from the pool. A quiet ask, handled without discussion. The page had been damaged, the ink bled, the paper waterlogged and then dried into a warped, translucent version of itself. The number was still legible. $12 million, visible in the way that things are visible when they are damaged but not destroyed, when the record of what was attempted survives even if the attempt didn't. He had it framed. Simple black frame, beside the ultrasound. Naomi saw it on a Wednesday morning and stood in front of it for a long time without saying anything. He watched her from the doorway of the room. Her hand went to her belly. The automatic gesture, the new version of the way she used to reach for the coat pocket. Present and instinctive and entirely real. "That's a strange thing to frame," she said finally. "I know," he said. "Why?" He thought about it. "Because I want her to be able to see it someday," he said. "When she's old enough. I want her to be able to look at what was offered for her absence and know what it was refused for." Naomi looked at the two frames, the photograph, the ruined page. "One is what they tried to erase," she said, "and one is the price they thought could buy it," he said. "I want her to know the difference." Naomi turned to look at him. The morning light was in the room and on her face, and she looked like herself. Exactly like herself, not a managed or softened version, not the face she offered to rooms that required something from her. Just Naomi, in February, with the particular dignity of a woman who had been asked to disappear and had declined. "She's going to be all right," Naomi said. "She has stubborn parents." "She does," he said. "She's going to be loud," Naomi said. "I want you to be prepared for that. I was a loud baby. My mother has told me repeatedly." "I'm prepared." "You're not," she said. "But you will be." He crossed the room and stood beside her, looking at the two frames on the table. The grainy black and white, the ruined settlement page, the sum of what had been attempted and what had held against it. He put his arm around her. She leaned into him, not completely, not in the way of someone who needed to be held up, but the small lean of a person who chooses to be close because they want to be, not because they have to. The difference mattered. He had learned the difference. Maya was born on a Thursday in March, at 4:47 in the morning, 7 pounds, 2 ounces. A loud, specific objection to the world she had been delivered into, which subsided within 60 seconds into something quieter and more alert. The look, the nurse said with a laugh, of a baby deciding whether this place was worth her time. Adrian was beside Naomi throughout. He held her hand for 11 hours and said very little because she didn't need words, she needed presence, and he was learning the difference between those things. When Maya was placed in Naomi's arms for the first time, he looked at his wife's face and felt something in his chest that he could not name and did not try to. Some large and irreducible thing that had no adequate language and didn't need one. Naomi looked at Maya and then looked at him with wet eyes that she made no attempt to hide, which was how he knew the size of the moment, because Naomi cried in positions she chose. "Hi," Naomi said to her daughter. Just that. Just hi. The whole enormous fact of it reduced to one syllable, because one syllable was all you needed. Maya's eyes found Naomi's face with the unfocused but unerring instinct of the newly arrived. She stayed. In the spring, Evelyn came to the apartment for the first time. Adrian had not invited her before and had not forbidden it. He had simply waited, letting the distance stand as its natural consequence until whatever was going to shift in his mother had shifted enough. When she called in April and asked if she could visit, he asked Naomi, and Naomi said yes, and they set a Sunday. Evelyn arrived with something wrapped in paper that turned out to be a small wooden jewelry box, carved, that had belonged to her own mother. She did not explain the significance of it in a speech. She handed it to Naomi at the door and said, "For Maya, when she's older. It was my mother's." And then she came inside and sat on the couch and held her granddaughter for 40 minutes, with an expression on her face that had nothing managed about it at all. It was not reconciliation in the easy sense. There was no clean moment where the past was revised or forgiven or declared resolved. There were boundaries, maintained carefully by both Naomi and Adrian, tested occasionally by Evelyn and held. There were Sunday visits that were sometimes comfortable and sometimes awkward, and sometimes briefly good. There were consequences that did not fully reverse. Vivian remained in Vancouver. The estate on Long Island became, quietly, a place they visited less than they had before. The organizational arrangements that had once connected the family to Park Jin-woo's world remained disconnected, and the security company grew without them, and the Kwan name appeared in business contexts that had nothing to do with what it had once been associated with. Park himself maintained the consulting arrangement. He was professional. He was useful in the specific way he had always been useful, and he kept to the lane that had been defined for him with the disciplined attention of someone who understood precisely what his position was and what it was not. They never discussed Monday night. They discussed logistics and regional partnerships and quarterly reviews, and that was all, and it was enough. Helena met Maya on a Sunday in May. She came to the apartment alone, which was unusual. Helena had not gone anywhere alone in years, preferring the managed presentation of staff and family. She sat in the living room with Maya in her arms and looked at her great-granddaughter with those still, dark eyes that had looked at everything in this family for 78 years. Maya looked back. Children, at 2 months old, do not have preferences about who holds them that can be read with any certainty. But Maya lay in Helena's arms without objecting, and Helena held her with the competence of a woman who had held 3 generations, and there was something in the old woman's face, not warmth, not exactly, but the softening of something long rigidified, the way ice at the edge softens before the center gives, that said more than she would ever say with words. She handed Maya back to Naomi when Maya began to fuss. Naomi took her daughter and settled her against her shoulder and looked at Helena. "She has Adrian's forehead," Helena said. "She does," Naomi said. "She has your mouth," Helena said. She looked at Naomi directly, those assessing eyes finally offering what Naomi had never received in this family before, the specific attention of being seen accurately without the filter of what you were supposed to be. "She'll be trouble," Helena said. Naomi almost smiled. "Good." she said. Helena looked at her for one more moment. Then she looked away, at the room, at the framed photographs on the wall, at the small jade piece that Adrian had placed on the shelf beside them. A gift from Helena herself, years ago, that he had kept without knowing why. She saw it. He watched her see it. She did not say anything about it. But something in her posture changed, in the specific way of someone who has seen evidence of something they had doubted and are deciding, quietly and without announcement, to revise. She stayed for an hour. When she left, she touched Naomi's hand at the door. Brief, precise, the gesture of someone who did not touch casually and meant it when they did. Naomi closed the door and stood with her hand against it for a moment. Adrian was behind her, Maya in his arms, the two of them in the hallway of their apartment in the late afternoon light. That was something, Naomi said, without turning around. Yeah, he said. She turned. She looked at him holding their daughter, the black dragon tattoo at his neck, Maya's small fist finding the fabric of his shirt and gripping it with the extraordinary strength of the newly born, his face in the way it only was in these moments, open in a way that had no other occasion. We're going to be all right, Naomi said. Not a question this time. Not the careful, weighted version she'd said in the car, the one that held the fear inside it. This was different. This was a statement of existing fact, observed and confirmed. The way you confirm something you can finally see clearly after a long time of navigating in the dark. He looked at her. Yeah, he said. We are. Maya made a sound, small, emphatic, the sound of someone with opinions about how much attention was not currently being directed at her. They both looked down at her. Her eyes were open, her small face working through some internal calculation about the world. Naomi put her finger in Maya's reaching hand, and Maya gripped it. Outside the apartment window, the city ran itself in the April afternoon. The traffic and the voices and the particular restless hum of a place that never fully stops, that carries everything and reveals nothing, that has held 1,000,000 lives worth of weight without comment or judgment. Inside, 3 people stood in a hallway. The father who had stopped long enough to see what his love had been costing someone. The mother who had carried everything silently and put none of it down until she chose to. The daughter who had not been asked if she wanted to arrive into all of it and had arrived anyway, gripping what was offered,